Welcome aboard the Athearn Extra. I am so glad to have you guys aboard tonight. If you're joining us live on the live stream, thank you for joining us. If you're catching us on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel and then hit the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video like this is in our YouTube channel. I got a great show lined up here for you tonight. It's definitely train show season, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in a moment. But for now, let's see who's joining us in the chat. I see DG Model Works has joined us. Randall, Elko, CP368 Productions, KCG Rail Gilbert, Jamie, Thomas, Union Pacific, Bruce, Michael, and more. Chessie just joined the chat. So welcome aboard. I hope you guys are at a point where you can relax. Maybe you're working on your layout right now and you can grab the beverage of your choice and relax a little bit. If we have time tonight, we'll have a chance for you to ask some questions to our guest tonight. But let's get started with this Athearn Extra 3.3. Now we're just, as I was saying, a little over a week away from the Rocky Mountain Train Show in Denver, Colorado. In fact, as I broadcast this, I just got confirmation that the Athearn booth is packed and ready for transport to the show. Athearn's looking forward to seeing everyone for what is now, it's actually the largest train show west of the Mississippi. And none of it would be possible without our special guest tonight. And I'm going to bring aboard the coordinator and the chief of everything that goes on with that show, John Gardberg. John, welcome aboard. How are you tonight? John, how you doing tonight? Sorry, your microphone cut out.
That's all right. I'm doing well. Today we actually were at the facility marking the floors and making sure the tables are set up correctly.
So, I mean, yeah, you're about 1 week, 1 day away from the big show. And I'm sure as any train show coordinator, you've got a lot going on right now.
We do. To give you an idea of the size of the show, it's over 3 acres in size. We have over 150 vendors, 30 operating layouts. And right now, starting earlier in the week, as we started getting the phone calls about people inquiring about ensuring that they have the correct information for shipping. Most of the larger vendors and manufacturers will ship in some part of their product or have panel trucks drop off their gear.
Yeah, and of course, Athearn, we're going to be there with our booth and product. We're going to be in the expo hall. It's the main building, I guess, and section G5F6. And I did want to say, too, John, while I'm thinking of it, for fans of the special Bicentennial Edition Union Pacific DDA 40X and Caboose, I'm giving away these limited edition stickers, as UP 6900 Bicentennial stickers. I've only made 100 of these, so the first 100 fans that come into the booth on Saturday, you'll get one of these limited edition stickers. And also, for the Rocky Mountain Train Show, we're going to be donating 2 Athearn Genesis locomotives for your door prizes, and we're going to be sending you a BNSF ES44 DC as well as a Pacific ST90 Mac.
And speaking of Union Pacific, Ed Dickens will be there on Saturday doing his spiel on the 4014. And so you can, perfect. Yeah, so if you go to RockyMountainTrainShow.com, you can click on the clinics, and you can check out what time he'll be presenting and what location.
Yeah, and if you're watching this video and you want more details on the Rocky Mountain Train Show, check out the link in the description below in this video. There is a lot to see, and we've got a lot of questions for you tonight, John. So let's go ahead and get started. Especially for the folks that have maybe been on the fence about going to the show. If you've never been before, you really do need to check this out. It's a really great show. First up, John, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into model railroading?
So I was 3 or 4 years old, and my mom and dad bought me a Lionel starter set. And I was into that until I turned 16 or 17, and then some other priorities took over. And then went to college, and once I graduated, I started getting back into the hobby a little bit. but it wasn't until my wife had spotted a flyer for the train show at Clopar Hobbies, and she goes, "John, you were into trains." At that point, I had maybe 2 or 3 totes of my collection here in Denver, and she goes, "You're into trains. Maybe we should go to the show." I think she regrets it now. And at that show, I joined the Train Collectors Association Rocky Mountain Division, and I purchased a Commodore Vanderbilt locomotive, and it just kind of started snowballing after that. And then, as a member of our local division, I would volunteer to help out where I could, and then I ended up in this position one day when my predecessor decided to do his own thing. And so they said, "Can anyone run the show?" And I said, "Well, I can try." And I've been doing that for 6 years now as the lead co-chair.
Wow. Okay. So as far as the model railroading for you, what do you find the most interesting aspect of it? I'm actually still into O-scale 3 rail. I actually but I'm trying to get more into operations. And one of my favorite things is actually building things out, like doing everything from the bench work to the scenery. And I haven't had that much time really to get into doing the operating. I have several invites to run trains with some of the local groups, and that's something I'm really interested in doing. So. And now you kind of maybe alluded to it, but do you have a layout? And if you do, tell us a little bit about it.
I do have a layout under construction. I told Jim earlier, I spend about 3 hours a day on average just on the train show, so it doesn't leave a lot of time for my modeling at home. But basically, the layout runs the entire perimeter of my basement. It's about 150 feet of track, I think, right now. And yes, it's a loop, but at least I can start it up and let it go while I do other things in the basement. It's typical construction. It's basically platforms built on using 3/4-inch Baltic birch with holes through it for wiring, and so that and I am going to try and model some of what's going on here, in the western states, in particular Union Pacific and Burlington Northern and Santa Fe.
Okay, all right. So it's more of a modern type layout you're going for.
But fortunately, because of Ed Dickens' efforts, I can run the 4014. Well, I don't own one yet, but I could run a 4014. And it'll be right at home, in 2024. So. Yeah,
absolutely. So give us a little bit of a background or the history of the Rocky Mountain Train Show. How did it start, and some of the key dates in the history of this show?
So going back to the early 1970s, there was a club here. And again, it was mainly O-scale 3-rail guys. Who one of them was Warren Mizell from Mizell Trains, as well as other people who were collectors, and they had started a show, and I think they just called it a holiday train show, and it was around Thanksgiving every year. And then they joined Warren Mizell, and some of the other guys were the ones who actually took that small club and worked with the Train Collectors Association to make it a division. So we're the Rocky Mountain Division, TCA. And the show started growing slowly over time, going from, my understanding was, I think it had been on some of the gymnasiums or churches, but finally it started going to the fairgrounds, and then it grew again. And we started at the Crown Plaza, and this is before I moved here. The Crown Plaza in Chambers and I-70, and anyone who's come to Colorado for the G-Scale convention or the Narrow Gauge convention, that's the hotel where they would hold those events. One thing led to another, and we ended up moving to the Denver Mart, and that was, I think, around 2006 or 2007. I take that back. 2007 was our convention, so it was 2008, 2009. And my predecessor started pursuing, it was a very large space, and my predecessor started pursuing the larger manufacturers to come to the show. And we started growing it from a few thousand attendees to over 12,000 in 2019. And then in 2020, we had a decline because of COVID, and now we're rebuilding. We changed locations from the Denver Mart to the National Western Complex, and that's where we are today. And we're expecting between 10,000 and 12,000 people coming to our show. So it's about In terms of attendance, it's between, depending on what year you look at, the Amherst show, it's between 50%, between 35 and 50% of that attendance. And coincidentally, it's about the same in terms of vendors. We have 155 vendors and exhibitors, or vendors and manufacturers. Amherst has, I think, 360.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you can't make it out west, go to Springfield, Massachusetts, and check out the Amherst show.
But in the recent years, I mean, the Rocky Mountain Train Show has been growing, hasn't it?
We have started rebounding from COVID, yes.
Yeah. And you said, so you started taking over operations about 6 years ago.
Right.
Tell us a little bit of what that first show was like. You've just taken on the operations.
So from a back office standpoint, it wasn't anything new. I had always been, from the time we moved to the Denver Mart, I was the registrar for the show. So I knew how to basically, take in money, assign tables, work with the vendors and manufacturers to make sure their locations were good. What was new to me was when the club said, okay, well, how are you going to recruit manufacturers and more vendors? And so my first trip was to the TCA York show, where I started working with Lionel and Bachman and Atlas and some of the other manufacturers. And then the show after that was Train Fest in Milwaukee. And that's where I started meeting even more people who were into the different scales, basically the 2-rail guys. So
very cool. Now, as we've established this, this is now the biggest train show west of the Mississippi. What are some of the biggest struggles on putting on a show of this size?
Volunteers. We're a train club, and we rely heavily on volunteers. And sometimes we have, like for instance, today when we were laying out the floor plan, where we actually get chalk and write down where different layouts go at the facility. Sometimes we'll have 7 or 8 people, but because we actually were invited by the facility to come in early, we didn't get our normal number of volunteers. So you have 4 people doing the work of 8, and it got done. And so that's one of the things. So getting volunteers and then coordinating. We do a lot of coordination with the Colorado Model Railroad Museum and Michelle Kemperman and her team, as well as the Boy Scouts of America. They come in and they volunteer as well as help out with everything from scanning tickets to helping. And this year we're bringing Thomas the Tank Engine back. And they help out with, with the kids, getting them on and off the train, but also, doing all the contract work. We're 501c3, so I'm not divulging anything you could find out, but yeah, it's a 6-figure show. And being responsible for that and taking care of all the contracts is also, one of the things. We actually offer advice to other organizations, like, hey, how did you do this? Or, how do you think we should do that? And, everything from marketing to how did we decide on the floor plan? How did we decide where to put the manufacturers? So those are all kind of struggles that we deal with, as well as trying to share our solutions with other organizations so that they can make their shows better as well.
And I can say from a manufacturer standpoint, you and your team of volunteers are always busy, right down to making sure. Last year, I remember, I think you personally came over to the booth and made sure that I had a lunch for that day. You had crews coming over with water. It's just the simple things like that a lot of us forget, especially if you're going to a show as to enjoy it. You don't think about stuff like that. A lot of these vendors, we're on our feet for 8 hours or more. We're talking constantly, and man, it's refreshing to have someone, show up with a cold bottle of ice water, so just those little things, it really does show.
Yep. And that's one of the things we pride ourselves on. And again, you always see me because I'd served in the military, and like anything else, I've learned, I never learned the lesson of not raising your hand. So I have a tendency to take on probably a little more than I should. But if you live in the Denver metro area and you want to volunteer at the show, you do not have to be a member of our organization. You can just be a hobbyist who doesn't want to have to deal with club membership but wants to contribute. And we'll be happy to work with you and have you volunteer at the show.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. Thank you for your service, by the way. We all appreciate that. And anyone who's been at the show and seen you at the show, when the show is going, that's not your time to relax either. You are just as busy, probably busier, when the show's actually running than the steps leading up to it. Is that a true assessment?
That's true. Usually I wear, I don't know when I started, but I usually wear a long sleeve long sleeve t-shirt. So I'm easily identifiable. And I've learned to take a couple of Advil in the morning of each, before each show. So,
Wow.
and yes, I stay busy because I'm the one who has, like, unfortunately, I am kind of the answer guy.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things too, and we've all been there. I can say as a manufacturer, we've had some hiccups. Now, for those that don't know, last year, the Athearn booth was actually stuck in Chicago for over a week. And literally, refresh my memory, John, I don't think the booth got there until something like 15 minutes before setup. Does that sound right?
I think that's about right. And I may be mistaken, but I think it shipped by rail.
Yeah, it did. It actually shipped by rail. So ironically enough, it was stuck in Chicago for a week. But, John has helped Athearn in the past where we had some hiccups in shipping that he has helped us out with. And these are just some of the things that, behind the scenes that folks may not realize what your show coordinators have to do with both vendors and retailers and manufacturers. And so sometimes you kind of have to look at things like a triage because you've got so much going on in the middle of a show.
Right, and we do a after action review with starting off with our volunteers to see what went right, what went wrong. A lot of it starts off with if we ran out of door prize cards, because the door prize card is a survey card, and that's actually how we maintain a house list of everyone who comes to the show. From to if the ticketing systems go down, trying to come up with workarounds for that. But then, but once we've done our internal audit, we start talking to the manufacturers, finding out what went right, what went wrong, what can we do different. One of the things we're doing different this year, and it was really funny that all the manufacturers were great because traditionally we've had since we moved to the National Western Complex, all we had was black pipe and drape, and we had changed from that at our before COVID. And we just weren't the companies. We couldn't find any other color from any other company until this year. So I sent out a survey going, "Hey, what color? Would you be like? What colors work for you? Which one's done? How tall do you want it?" And basically, all the manufacturers were like, "We're just happy to be at the show." So this year, instead of black, it's going to be in the front part of the show where the manufacturers are. It's going to be burgundy and white.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
I know, from experience, this will be my third year doing the show, and John is really, really flexible. There are times where he's got the show where everybody's going to go on the floor layout and everything else, and like me, I'll say, hey, you know what? We're good partners with Soundtracks. And of course, knowing what you know now, probably having George and I that close together may not be a good thing. But you were able to move things around and get the Athearn booth next to Soundtracks. And this is just I'm just one manufacturer. I'm sure you get that all the time.
We do, and I have, and the parties that are involved know some of my mistakes of what manufacturers not to put near other manufacturers. And it was funny when I first started working with when MTH was still on the road. We worked with MTH and Lionel, and I said, "Do you guys mind being across from MTH?" And they're like, "No, And that's when I found out. I was like, sometimes they'll watch the other guy's booth. If the other person has to go get food, which again takes us back to why we bring you guys food. It's so that you don't have to go wait in line for half an hour, and then bring your food back. But no, so everyone seemed, every once in a while there is a request. Hey, can we be closer to here? Can we, can we face a different direction? Anything like that. And that's what we try to do. And then we lock that in. And so that in 2025, You will be, if you're coming back, you will be next to Soundtracks.
Right.
Unless Nancy or George says something.
Well, George and I do have shenanigans now and then, if anybody's watched YouTube lately.
So.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. A lot of us, now Athearn, I will be going representing Athearn, and of course George Bogatak will be representing Soundtracks. And where George has to do clinics, there's nobody watching the booth. So like you said, a lot of us will watch that booth in the absence of the booth member. And one of the things I really like about your show is it's a real nice sense of community. Even though there's competing manufacturers and vendors there, it still has a nice feel to it. You don't feel an antagonistic air about it in the air. It's just a great show to mingle and such.
Yeah, and for us, and again, being a division of the Train Collectors Association, everyone assumed some people assume, oh, those are toy trains. And it's like, no, it's an all-scale show. And actually, we're co-hosted by the the Rocky Mountain region of the NMRA. And so they'll have their booth across from Class 1 Model Works. And so we had, and I think Cynthia Priest will be in that booth. And again, it's about the hobby. And I don't care, we don't care if you make wooden trains or you make the super detailed diesels or locomotives. It's about being able to providing an environment where beginners, whether they are 3 or 103 years old, can start getting into the hobby and providing an environment where they can learn things and, of course, see what new products are coming out and actually, in some cases, being able to play with the trains. So
right, yeah. I mean, you and I were talking just before the show, and I was saying, 25 years ago when I was going to shows and seeing young ones with their little Thomases in their fists, wondering how many of those children grew up to be the model railroaders that we see that are active in whatever aspect of model railroading. And considering, seeing so many young people, especially at your show and the Amherst show, I'm thinking a lot of them did end up becoming model railroaders.
And well, yeah, and it's kind of funny because I'm 56 years old. I've been doing the show since I've been involved in our club since I was in my mid-30s. And one of the things that's is kind of crazy, like when you see Boy Scouts or even Cub Scouts go from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, maybe they get their Eagle or maybe they're a Life Scout, and then you find out like, oh yeah, that person is in the Airborne Infantry now, because you ask, you see a parent or a parent finds you, or oh yeah, they're a doctor. So but the thing is, like at one time or another, they came to our show, and they were interested enough, to come back, or at least someone will, find me and go, say thank you. So yeah, that's one of the best parts about it. So yeah.
Yeah, and like you were saying earlier too, I mean, it's a train show, so it doesn't matter if it's a wooden train or a very intricate HO scale layout. Is something there for everyone, and there's something I believe that you can probably learn something from not just all scales, but all types of model railroading, and it definitely has a great welcoming appeal to the younger audience. But then on the same note too, you haven't given up on the guys that are the prototype modelers either. You've got quite a bit there. Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, as much as we make, I have a lot of friends who are foaming rivet counters. But and that's one of the things is like, that's what they like about our show. The ones who get over the idea of, oh yeah, it's a toy train show, which it's not. They actually have the opportunity to come and they meet the major manufacturers in the hobby. And so I think that's really great. And one of the videos we did last year and we reposted a few weeks ago was of the was it one of the live steam groups came in and with an air compressor, and they basically were able to power up one of their locomotives. So we have everything from TT to I think 7.5-inch gauge is what they is the right size. And those guys, I mean, again, not only are they really into the detail aspect of the hobby, they have literally miles of track that they run their trains on.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. So off the top of your head, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but you mentioned you've got T all the way to this large scale. How many different scale layouts do you think will be shown at this year's Rocky Mountain Train Show?
There are 32 operating layouts plus additional layouts that are on some of our vendors' tables.
Okay.
So we'll just stick with 32 because that's what you can find online. And they do range in scale from a TT, and I wish I had a container. The small scale, I think it's in a little tote that's like this big by about that big, like a foot and a half by a foot.
Interesting.
And we have T-track layouts. I think HO and N, there's more of those scales than the other scales. We have at least one O scale 3-rail layout, and two Fremo layouts.
Okay.
So those are interesting because they're the ones who don't have to fit in a box or boxed off area, and they're the ones who it's when working with the fire marshal, we have to explain that they're going to go this way and that way, and and it's not just a square, not like our club's layout, which is a rectangle. And that's what I think too. You get to see a lot of people will come in and they will have only experienced transformer controlled trains. At the show, they can see remote controlled trains, and they get to hear and see all the bells and whistles. So
right. Tell us a little bit about your club. I know it's a O scale. It's a 3-rail, correct?
So our modules, O scale 3-rail and S gauge. I'm sorry, not S gauge. S gauge. And so most of our members are 3-rail collectors and S gauge collectors. And that layout, so that's the layout. The club itself, we have everyone. If you can think of anything that's post-war or pre-war, that would basically define our club.
Okay.
And the reason we got into having a show with multiple scales is we didn't care about ours. We cared more about the hobby and people finding different interests in it.
Sure.
So,
yeah, that's a good point to bring up. I know a lot of folks tend to be somewhat scale specific and kind of forgetting that you can learn a lot of things from other scales. And so having that attitude right up front, that's really opened the doors for you to have a show with a great variety of layouts. And again, if you're watching this and you've got time to make the trip to Denver for the show, you really do owe it to yourself because the Denver area alone is kind of a hot spot for model and prototype railroading.
There's actually several really well-known personally owned layouts here. Although we don't currently host tours during our show, there are some that are organized, some for the manufacturers, some by people who are interested in having guests, to their house to do operating sessions. So also, I noticed that Jeff Pierce was saying, I've noticed at my shows that the young girls are more into trains than some of the boys are. That's one of the things. We not only are we not scale specific, we don't care who plays with the trains.
Right.
And to that end, we have Michelle Kempema and Cynthia Priest and Nancy Workman and several other women who are in the hobby that are in the NMRA special interest group for women in model railroading. And anything we can do to promote the hobby to anybody, that's what we're interested in doing. Yeah,
you bring a great point. This is one of those hobbies that I think in reality there really isn't a gender specific hobby, but model railroading is such an all-encompassing hobby that it's open to everyone. And the cool thing about that is it allows us to have the diversity to bring in all types of people and just more to learn. And I don't know, I'm sure you've noticed, and a lot of our guests that are watching have noticed, but it seems to me in the last 10 years, the dynamics of model railroading has just gotten that much better because we've got so many different people with different backgrounds coming into the hobby and showing us a new way to make trees or a new way to do operating sessions and things of that nature. So yeah, a good point. So we've talked a little bit about the layouts. Tell us about the vendors, because you're going to have these folks that are going to be coming into the show, and whether they're a seasoned veteran like some of our viewers, or maybe somebody that's wanting to get into the hobby, they're going to want to find a place to spend their money. Tell us a little bit about the vendors you've got coming out.
So our vendors, we have some vendors have a single 8-foot long table. Other vendors have, I think 10. I think the largest has 10 booths or 30 tables. So they bring in a lot of product to the show. Some of the names you may be familiar with are Spring Creek Model Trains out of Nebraska, Model Train Solutions out of California. Then there's a Reindeer Pass. I'm trying to go through the list. Reindeer Pass, Teskey's Toy Trains, Brad's Trains out of Texas. We have a couple of new O-scale 3-wheel folks also out of Texas. Again, it's 100, including manufacturers. Again, it's 155 vendors.
Wow.
And then about to break it down, let's just say 120 vendors, 30 manufacturers.
Wow. So
and
that's impressive.
And you'll find, and people always ask, will there be new stuff? I mean, this is one of the common questions. Will there be vendors selling new stuff at the show, or is it all old stuff? And I'm like, well, the new stuff came out of the factories probably a month ago, and the old stuff's can be over 100 years old, because again, you're dealing with Lionel pre-war that goes back to 1901.
Right.
And so you can find almost anything you're looking for at the show.
So what do you think is the furthest vendor that you've got at the show this year?
I want to say Southern Florida.
Wow. Okay.
And they're driving in. And then we also have actually Broadway Limited. They're coming out of Florida as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have Rapido coming in from Canada. We have, I don't know about Oregon. We have Katie's coming in.
Okay.
Model Train Solutions that I mentioned, they're out of California as well.
So yeah, you've got a good draw from all over the country. It's not just a regional area that you're drawing from, but you're getting a pretty good crowd from all over the United States and Canada. And I think too with some of the layouts too. Not all of the guys that are setting up layouts, they're not exactly local, are they?
I think the furthest one comes from 300 or 400 miles away.
Okay, that's a good distance.
And like one of the new ones this year is the Santa Fe All the Way layout. I think he's coming from Missouri. That's 8 or 9 hours. So,
the other thing that I learned about this show early on is there have been some shows that I'm sure all of us have been to. You're kind of a captive audience, and your meal selection, if you're there during lunchtime, is rather limited to a $10 hot dog and a $4 thing of chips. You've got a really good thing going on there, even for the parents with children that need to get them fed for lunchtime, and some hungry vendors that I might know as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the National Western Complex is where the National Western Stock Show is held, and those folks like to eat. So we actually have several restaurants in the building, and so it's everything from hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza. I think they do. I don't know if they do French dip, but there's the standard fare, and then there's also we have roasted almond vendors. I think this year we're trying to get the funnel cake guy to come back.
Oh wow!
So basically fair food.
Yeah.
There's a cafeteria where you can go in, and you actually and it's just like a cafeteria. You go up, you get in line, come back, sit at a picnic table. You can eat your lunch there, or there's other areas we're going to have set up where you can take your food to eat. Some of them will be near some of the running layouts, so you have that opportunity to eat and watch trains. Unlike some other events, I'll just say that one of the major sponsors of the National Western Complex is Coors.
Okay.
So there are adult beverages as well. But no, the food's pretty good, but like you said, you'd mentioned about like $4 chips. It's not inexpensive, but again, that's the way all of those that's all the way all the expos are, whether it's model train expos or Comic Cons. The food inside, you're a captive audience, and so the food inside is kind of pricey. But the good news is the tickets to the show are $14 at the door. You can get, if you're buying 2 or more tickets, you can buy. We have online pricing that drops it down, so you can get 2 tickets for $25. It's a $3 savings. We've worked out with a facility so you don't have to pay extra for parking. So you get in the door with what you pay for your ticket. Supporting our local hobby stores like Colpar Hobbies and Rocky Mountain Train Supply, formerly Rocky Mountain In-Scale Supply. Those organizations plus the Colorado Model Railroad Museum actually have our tickets on sale for $11. So that's $3 off face value. And the reason we do that is to drive business or interest to those locations.
And, earlier and just now you brought up the Colorado Model Railroad Museum as well as Michelle. That's about, what, an hour north of Denver? So if you're coming in for the weekend, maybe you're just taking a quick weekend trip and you want to go see some more trains, you can just owe it to yourself to go up north. And John, I know you've worked with Michelle in the past. For somebody that's never seen that layout that they have at the museum, what do you think?
It's awesome. We are fortunate in Colorado. We do have several museums that have operating layouts. That one, the one in Greeley, that's where the museum is probably one of the most detailed, most complete, and finished layouts. Some of the other ones are under construction or they're smaller. The museum layout in Greeley, the Colorado Model Railroad Museum's layout is it's really something to behold. And so if you volunteer there, you get to run trains. Every once in a while, they'll host special events where I could trying to think of if it was like I think someone brought in like a Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey train, and they were all out, they could run on the train because it's all, I believe it's DCC. So,
yeah,
you need to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're watching this and you want to hear more details on the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, go back to our YouTube channel, and it's actually the Athearn Extra that we did just before this one, 3.2, where I interview Michelle Kempova of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum. And really, I mean, if you made Denver a weekend destination as a rail fan and a model railroader, you're going to be happy because there's plenty of rail fanning. I know I've done some rail fanning around the area, and like you said, there's just so much to see. It's kind of hard to keep it all in one weekend.
Yeah. So when you come to the show, or if you come to Denver, I would plan, if you can swing it, plan a week. Whether you it starts with the train show or ends with our train show, really doesn't matter. What matters is coming to Denver and enjoying it. We have, like right now, because our show is later, it's 1 month later than it used to be. So right now, some of the scenic railroads are starting their steam ups, and so you could actually. I would check on which ones have started up. I know that the Georgetown Loop is up. I believe Durango and Silverton is. But again, you need to go online and check and see which ones are up. You mentioned rail fanning. Actually, from the Hall of on the north side of the Hall of Education at the show, there's a platform and stairs. You can actually go out and observe. I believe it's the BNSF yard or the UP yard. So there's always train action visible from our show.
Yeah, I remember last year, I think it was, maybe the year before, I got quite a bit of action out there just before the show started. So definitely, if you're a rail fan, you'll want to check that out too and see. So, you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier in the program, but, the show is over. You've had a great attendance, but your job's not done. You still have more work to do. Tell us a little bit about the post-op of the show.
Right. So it takes us several weeks to get out, because vendors and manufacturers always want to know, what's the count? What was the count? When the show was smaller, we could actually get a good idea of the count prior to closing on Sunday. Right now, again, we have our volunteers are so busy, we don't have time. We collect the tickets, but we don't necessarily count them that day. And there's other ways to look at it, because not only do we have the tickets that we sell online and on site, but we also donate 750 tickets to VetTix. So if you're a veteran or a first responder, you can, I think there's like a small fee, like $1 or $2 fee, where you can, so we actually have to literally count the number of people who came in with those tickets and compare that to what, our ticket count. What we try to do is within 6 weeks of the show ending, we send out a report to any manufacturer or vendor who was at the show that compares the most current show, good, bad, or better, to the prior shows. And we actually compare every show year over year in one graph in two graphs. And like one of the things we noticed is that immediately after COVID, our initial counts were lower than we anticipated, but sales were way up. And so the rate of sales has been increasing faster than than the number of people attending the show, which means people are coming and spending money.
Yeah, perfect. And just based on what happened at the Amherst show this past year, they had a record attendance. I'm wondering. I think we're getting a lot more people coming out now. It's been a little bit since the pandemic, and I think a lot of folks are wanting to get back into the normal train show season. So I'm going to predict that you probably are going to have a pretty good attendance this year. I'm thinking it's going to be a busy show this year.
That's what we always hope. Again, more eyeballs, more hands and trains, making allowing the hobby to grow.
Absolutely.
That's our goal.
When it does come time to pack up the booth and get ready for the journey home for all of us, I can say we could definitely tell the service member in you, because it's run like military precision. I've been to a lot of shows where it's tear down and it's just bedlam. Your show, there is a rhyme and reason to everything, and it's very much appreciated. Tell us a little bit, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, what's going on.
I think Jim's been wearing his rose-colored glasses. Because sometimes to me it feels like bedlam. One of the things, so one of the major changes between the Denver Mart, which was actually torn down after COVID, and the National Western facility, is we actually can allow vendors and manufacturers to drive up to their or really close to their booths. And so that's been interesting. And because the show has grown so much, we had once upon a time, we started with like almost every other train show, a Friday morning load-in train show on Saturday. Now to accommodate all of the manufacturers coming to the show and some of the really large vendors, we actually have a Thursday load-in. So we go through and we look at two things: how many tables does somebody have, and where are they located within the show, and that determines when they load in. Load-in's fairly well controlled. We actually I know who is going to be the very first vendor in the door Thursday morning, at least in the front part of the show. I know, that's fairly easy. And then the next is like manufacturers. At our show, when you're a manufacturer, or you've bought the commercial booths, there are certain advantages. And one of those is being able to load in a little bit earlier on Thursday or Friday, depending on where you're located and what time you're going to be in town. Loadout is more interesting. What we've started learning is that we have to keep the overhead doors closed we started opening them at 4:00 when the show was over, and once the public was out. Then we learned, we need to wait 15 minutes, make sure the public is out because people are wrapping up those transactions. Sure. But also, some people they're not really ready to load their vehicle, but they want to bring in their vehicle because there's a fear that if they don't, they're going to be there until Monday morning waiting to load out. Right. So what we do this year, we're actually going to hold everybody back, or you can actually pay your taxes and load up your stuff on your table ready to put in your vehicle, but we're going to make you wait till 4:30 before you can bring in your vehicle. Okay. And that will actually give time for some of the manufacturers are really fast, and they can get their stuff loaded up and ready to be taken to where it gets picked up on Monday morning. But the big thing is, again, all it takes is one car in the wrong place, and then a larger vendor like Spring Creek Model Trains may have to wait. We don't. And I use them. I also use Choo Choo's R Us as an example. The Hosians, that's Choo Choo's R Us, and the Zuckers, that's Spring Creek Model Trains. They bring a lot of product, and they know how to load and unload. Mm-hmm. And with those guys, we know that they say, it'll take us 30 minutes to load. Well, when they bring in their trailer, they're ready to load the trailer and go.
Right.
Some people have a false sense of time. I'll say that. And but I do appreciate that you think it's super well organized. I look at it as no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So
yeah. Well, it really is. It's one of those things where any show coordinator, there's a lot going on at all times, and you have to pivot at any given moment, and nothing always goes exactly as planned. So I have from the outside, for a lot of the folks that are attending, they don't see all this. It's kind of like what really happens behind the magic kingdom of Disney. There's a lot going on, right. And it's appreciated.
Well, thank you. But basically, I'm asked, how many hours does it take? Do I put into the shows each year? Because we do 2 shows. We do our big show in Denver. We do a medium-sized show in Loveland. This year, we're actually again expanding to have a summer show, which is much smaller at the Forney Museum. But the big thing is how much time do you spend working on the train show? And I mentioned it's about 3 hours a day on average. Wow. But that is over 1,000 hours a year just for me. So for the National Western, the show at the National Western Complex, there's probably 3,000 volunteer hours go into that prior to the show. Wow. And another couple of, depending on how you count it, like if you count up Boy Scout hours and everyone else's hours, it's probably another 500 it could be I'd say 500 hours there for a show that basically lasts 16 hours. Okay. But what we think is if it's helping the hobby, and I preach this wherever I'm walking, wherever I am, and I'm doing Facebook Live, and we actually promote other shows. It's about the hobby, and it's worth it. Right. I would probably hear some disagreement from my wife and my kids, but I think it's worth it.
No, that's a good point. It's one of those things where I've talked to folks that, obviously I talked to John Sacerdoti of Amherst. I've talked to the folks that were on that Train Fest, and it's not who's the biggest, who's the best, who's the most interesting, anything like that. It's about bringing people into the hobby, and what you've been doing with the Rocky Mountain Train Show is very commendable. We're really happy to be a part of it this year and to get some donations for you guys. One last question for you, and if we have time, we'll let those who are watching live ask John a question about the Rocky Mountain Train Show or his modeling personal life. But if you were talking to somebody, let's say you're coming back from a show and you're promoting your show, and you've got a modeler, they've never been to Denver, they've never been to the Rocky Mountain Train Show, but they're like, I don't know, maybe. What would you tell them? How would you get them to come to the show? What would be your main marketing pitch?
So mainly it'd be, what scale are you into? And because you're talking about, someone who's already an established modeler. And I say, well, it just so happens we have these X, Y, and Z manufacturers that are coming to the show. We have these clinics presented by these people who will be coming to the show. If you're into Union Pacific's work on the Big Boy and their STEAM program, we have Ed Dickens at the show. We try to get him every year. If you're interested in, if you're looking for, and unfortunately Denver is really lacking. At one time, I think there were 30 train stores in Denver Metro back in the 70s. And that number's dwindled. The largest train store right now, and it's a dedicated train store, is Rocky Mountain Train Supply in Arvada. A close runner-up in terms of just the fact that they carry scenicking items, ready-to-run sets, some individual locomotives, and those kind of items would be Culper Hobbies. And that's why we've teamed up with both those organizations to sell our tickets. So
Yeah, and that reminds me too, John, on Friday, and folks watching this, you've probably seen the social media slides for it. On Friday at 4 o'clock, so just before the train show opens, we're going to be myself and George from Soundtracks. We're going to have a meet and greet over at Rocky Mountain Train Supply. Now they won't, unfortunately, have a booth at the show this year because they're down a person. But the good news is like you said, John, they are selling tickets there, and they are trying to be as active as they can be. We're going to return the favor for those guys and have a meet and greet there Friday at 4 o'clock. So come on out and see George and I. And I think George is going to do a quick little seminar for you guys that are into DCC. But all around, John, we're looking forward to coming on board for another great year. I'm looking forward to it.
thank you.
We've got time for a few questions, and then we're going to let John go because he is a busy man, as every show coordinator is. I saw a comment here earlier that I wanted to bring up from a Mr. Jeff Pierce. He said, John has always been very helpful dealing with us and getting us all set up for the show. And I don't know if that's a name you know or not.
Rio Grande Historical and Modeling Society.
Ah, okay. Great. One question from Peter, not quite train show related, but we'll put it up there. Wanting to know if delays because of what happened in Baltimore. No, in fact, we are going to be getting another shipment here pretty soon. And no, our product comes through mainly Long Beach and then goes by rail from Long Beach to Chicago and then down to Champaign. So not affected. Although what happened in Baltimore was horrible, and our thoughts and prayers with the families of the folks that were involved in that. That was a scary thing. Here comes a question. This is from Fleischman. Question is ticket admission for 1 or 2 days for $14.
2 days.
2 days. That's a bargain. That is a bargain. Let's see.
Yep, you'll get a wristband and just come back the next day. And that's one of the things that separates us. Again, we have been working really closely with the facility. So again, parking's included in that $14. We actually are on every ticket sold. We actually make less money in 2024 than we did in 2020.
Oh wow!
But we think it's worth it because I don't. Otherwise, you'd be paying $15 a day for parking.
Yeah, a good point. I mean, the parking there is extremely easy, and of course, you've got attendants that help with the parking and traffic control and things of that nature. It's perfect.
Right. And if you're walking from one of the far lots, you can actually once we have a certain number of lots filled, they start bringing on buses, so you can actually take a shuttle from one end of the facility to the other. If you live in Denver Metro, or you are if you're hardcore and you're flying into DIA, for example, you can take the A line, which is a commuter rail, to Union Station, and then hop on the N line. And the first stop out of Union Station on the N line going north is the National Western Complex campus. And then it's an 8-minute walk from the station to the front doors.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to get in there. And it's one of my highlights of spring. It's one of the things I look forward to in the spring is coming out to Denver. Now, that being said, I got to ask, what's the weather looking like next week? Do we know?
I haven't looked since yesterday, so give me 1 second.
Sure. Because it is Denver, just because the calendar says spring doesn't always mean.
We have a guy here in Colorado. His name's Dude Dad, or Dad Dude. And he does really funny things about Colorado and Colorado's weather. And the other one he was showing was taking out. I guess he had, for fun, he did this. He had a battery powered snowblower and a battery powered lawnmower. And he puts it in the lawnmower and it starts to snow. He takes it out, puts it in the snowblower, and the sun comes out. That's been the last 2 weeks.
Oh, that's neat.
Where is the 10-day forecast?
It's one of those things where you want to be prepared. So if you're coming from out of state, you want to know how to dress, how to pack, because You're probably going to want to spend some time rail fanning in Denver as well. It's a great place to rail fan.
Okay, so let's see. Since your manufacturer coming in earlier, on Thursday it'll be a high of 70 and a low of 41, with a 22% chance of precipitation. But for the show itself, it'll be the high that day will be 50 on Saturday, 59 on Sunday, 60 degrees. People always wonder, like, if the weather's too nice, people don't go to train shows, and if the weather's awful, people don't go to train shows. Colorado is interesting because no one does serious yard work until mid-May because you don't know what the weather's going to be the next day, and also we have these notorious hailstorms, which come through around right before Mother's Day, and but yeah, so basically we get good attendance because it's too soggy, literally, to work in your backyard. And the kids are looking for something to do, and we're getting near towards the end of the school season. And again, it's a fun event, and so people come in all weather.
That's good. Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a good forecast for a good train show. Like you said, not too hot, not too cold, no snow. Yeah, and you don't want it to be 70 and sunny because that can definitely affect it. So if you're in the Denver area next weekend, the 6th and 7th, do stop in to the Rocky Mountain Train Show. If you want to know more about the show, the link to the show is in the description of this video below. John, I want to thank you so much for joining us with your busy schedule. I'm sure you've got a lot going on, but once again, I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you too.
All right. Good night, John. So there you have it. If you've never been to the Rocky Mountain Train Show, you really do owe it to yourself. This will be my, I believe, 4th year going to the show, and it's a lot to see. So plan on spending the weekend. For $14, you've got a weekend to see. And a couple of things too I wanted to mention before we sign off for the night. Don't forget that just north of the train show is the Colorado Railroad Museum. Now you can find more details about that with my interview with Michelle Kempa in Athearn Extra 3.2. You can find that under the Athearn Extra in our YouTube selection. And also, don't forget that George and I will be at Rocky Mountain Train Supply Friday the 5th at 4 o'clock. Now we're going to have a meet and greet so you can talk trains with both of us. And then we're going to do a short seminar on dynamic digital exhaust. You've got a new Athearn Genesis locomotive and you want to put that and program that into your locomotive. George is going to show you how easy it is to add that simple function to your locomotive and also answer questions that you may have on Athearn Genesis and programming. Now, again, for more details on the show, check out the link in the video description below. And hopefully I'll see you at the train show. If I don't see you at the Rocky Mountain Train Show next weekend, I hope to see you at another show or another broadcast of the Athearn Extra. Until next time, everyone, I want everybody out there to be happy, be healthy, be safe, do some good modeling, and above all, high greens. Take care, everyone.